Hey y'all, today we're spilling the tea on one of the wildest blow-ups in history. How the US went from minding its own business to flexing as a global power. Yep, we're talking about expansionism to World War I, a time when America was basically the main character, going from an isolationist nobody to an international influencer. But honey, it wasn't all glitz and glam. There was drama, power plays, and a whole lot of shade. Ready to find out who threw hands, who got played, and how America ended up on top? Buckle up because it's about to get messy. Okay, so picture this. Back in the day, the US was like that quiet kid at the party, just chilling by the punch bowl and avoiding drama. They were all about isolationism, just trying to keep to themselves and avoid getting dragged into European messes. Ever since George Washington warned them to avoid entangling alliances, America was like, no thanks, not my circus, not my monkeys. They were focused on building their own house, staying neutral, and just living their best life. But you know what they say, curiosity killed the cat, and soon enough, Uncle Sam couldn't resist peeking over the fence. And this is where things get interesting. Enter Alfred Thayer Mahan, the original Navy hype man. This guy wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, and it basically said, if you want to rule the world, you need the biggest, baddest Navy. Mahan was all about the power of sea control. He argued that the strongest nations in history had the strongest navies, and if America wanted to play in the big leagues, they needed warships, naval bases, and control of global trade routes. Theodore Roosevelt was eating this up like his favorite snack. He was like, say less, and made it his mission to build a modern navy that could flex on the world stage. And thus, the seeds of American expansionism were planted. All right, the first bit of tea, Hawaii. This one's juicy, so grab your popcorn. In the late 1800s, Hawaii was chilling in the Pacific, minding its own business, ruled by Queen Liliuokalani. But American sugar planters were making bank off Hawaiian sugar, and they wanted more control. So they pulled the ultimate power move. They staged a coup with the help of the U.S. Marines, overthrew the Queen, and were like, hey, can we just add Hawaii to the U.S.? President Grover Cleveland was not having it. He was like, no, you can't just take over someone's kingdom. But when William McKinley became president, he was like, hey, why not? So in 1898, Hawaii was officially annexed, and Uncle Sam was one step closer to controlling the Pacific. The outcome? The U.S. got a prime naval base, Pearl Harbor, and a strategic location for expanding trade and military power. Sorry, Queen Liliuokalani, America wasn't here to play. Okay, so here's where things get really spicy. In 1898, the U.S. was side-eyeing Spain, who was clinging to its last colonies like an ex who just won't move on. Then, boom! The USS Maine explodes in Havana Harbor. No one knew who did it, but the newspapers were like, Spain did it! War! Now! Yellow journalism. Basically, 1890s clickbait went wild with headlines like Spanish treachery, and Americans were fired up. Next thing you know, President McKinley declares war and the U.S. swoops in to liberate Cuba. But let's be real, they wanted Spain's territories. So plot twist, the U.S. wins in record time and gets Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines under the Treaty of Paris. Suddenly, America was a legit empire and Spain was officially canceled. But this was a huge debate. The imperialists were like, we're spreading democracy and freedom. And the anti-imperialists were like, this looks like a whole lot like colonialization. Uncle Sam was flexing, but the haters were calling him a hypocrite. So, with all these new territories, the new president, Theodore Roosevelt, was feeling powerful, and he decided to make it clear to the world, don't mess with my neighborhood. Enter the Roosevelt corollary. Basically, he added to the Monroe Doctrine and said, if there's drama in Latin America, the U.S. has the right to step in and fix it, even if no one asked. He called it international police power, but it was more like, I'm the boss now. This was the turning point where America went from a regional power to global player, and the rest of the world was definitely paying attention. Teddy Roosevelt was all about big stick diplomacy. Speak softly and carry a big stick. And that big stick was the Great White Fleet. Picture this: 16 massive battleships painted all white to show off, sailing around the world just to say, "Look at what I got." It was basically the biggest flex in naval history. Teddy Roosevelt was not playing games. Okay, here's another plot twist. The U.S. wanted a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, so they went to Colombia like, "Hey, can we build a canal through the Isthmus of Panama?" And Colombia said, "Nah." And Theodore Roosevelt was like, "Oh, really?" The next thing you know, there's a revolution in Panama, and the U.S. is right there helping them gain independence. Surprise, surprise, the newly independent Panama lets the U.S. build the Panama Canal. But this was no walk in the park. The terrain was brutal. They had to dig through mountains, and the mosquitoes were out for blood. Literally. Malaria and yellow fever were wiping out workers until they figured out how to fight those pesky bugs. Then came the engineering nightmare, building the locks. They had to create a system that would lift ships over the mountain like a water elevator. But despite all the changes, the U.S. pulled it off, completing a project that the French had failed at. And just like that, America had the ultimate power play, a shortcut for global trade and military movement. Oh, and they controlled the Panama Canal Zone for almost a century. Talk about boss moves. By 1917, the U.S. was in it to win it. They went from neutral observer to the game changer in World War I. And by the end of the war, Uncle Sam was flexing as a global power with muscles labeled global influence. Woodrow Wilson dropped his 14 points like a mixtape, calling for world peace and the League of Nations. But Congress was like, hard pass, sticking to isolationism. America stepped up as a world leader, but kept one foot out of global politics. The period of expansionism to World War I was America's ultimate glow-up. From annexing Hawaii to flexing with the Great White Fleet and dominating global trade with the Panama Canal, the U.S. went from wallflower to main character really quickly. This era was all about turning points, continuity and change, balancing democracy with strategic interest. America became a global leader that stayed true to its values of freedom and prosperity. Thanks for watching. If you love historical tea, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more drama from the past. And remember, history is messy, but that's what makes it fun. Catch y'all next time.